because I kind of wanted this to be open for discussion between us. It's documented that there are no documents that ever said that there was a little girl named Sally. As a matter of fact, Dr. Finney ended up moving to the house directly next door and even became mayor of the town.
What?
Yes. He ended up becoming mayor of the town. And the weird thing is that for as many, I've even heard the story about how this was an African-American lady whom he had an affair with, and this was his daughter, and that to avoid bringing her to the hospital and being recognized as her father, which is why he did the surgery in his home. There's a lot of different stories. I couldn't tell you if any of them are true or if anything is true.
Right.
Because there's nothing documented. But I think that in a town that small, where this story has gone on for this long, if it was true, why wasn't he in jail?
Yeah.
How did he have the opportunity to move next door?
That is insane. And then how is there no record for someone named Sally, but a headstone in a cemetery?
It's very weird. And nobody, and
for a little girl
as
named
far
Sally.
as I could find, nobody knows who the Sally headstone belongs to.
But it's like old too, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean,
It's very weird. So, I mean, look, story has been going on forever.
And now the town owns the house, right?
Pretty sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can rent it out. You can actually go online, and I think we looked, it's like $125 a night per person, and you have to have like a minimum of a few
like
people.
4 or 6 people or something like that.
Maybe 2 to 5. I can't remember. I mean, do your own research. Good luck. I couldn't find much, and I looked pretty hard. I know the general story is because, I mean, if you've watched enough, Sallie House videos and stuff, it's pretty much the same story.
Yeah.
You can embellish it as much as you want, but it really is just the same story over and over.
And it's basically a legend.
Well, and at least with a lot of the places that we cover, like the jails and stuff like that, we have real accounts to go off of.
Right.
These are actual documented things that have happened. With this, it's not like that. Mm-hmm. So it's a mystery.
That's crazy.
It's a mystery.
So crazy.
I'm sure, however, you have stories for us.
I do have stories.
Well, let's get into the stories.
This is the terrifying story of a haunting inside a quiet town, on a suburban street, and behind the walls of a seemingly quaint family home. This is quite a story, so sit back, relax, if you can, and let's relive the horrifying accounts of a loving family that were tormented and ran out of what they thought was their perfect family dream home. A couple named Tony and Debbie Pickman were recently married and pregnant with their first child named Taylor. When they moved into the Sallie House in December of 1992, it looked like the perfect dream home to raise their family, but they didn't realize what they were getting into. They had no idea the dark energy that poured from the corners of the house because it wasn't obvious on the surface. To them, it just looked like a perfectly average 2-story home. It had a kitchen, a living room, and enough bedrooms to have more children if they wanted. But this was the first time in nearly 40 years that a man had occupied the property. The ghostly presence could sense him from the first moment he stepped through the front door. And within the very first month of living there, they noticed strange things starting to happen. Luckily, there was nothing that caused concern for the time being. Only small things like dimming lights and cold spots in random areas of the house. But every time they experienced something out of the ordinary, they just shrugged it off. It was an old home, so they wrote off the dimming lights and cold spots and just electrical problems or lousy insulation. They had no idea the intense, small, insignificant things were far more tame than what was to come. They ignored the strange events and continued settling into their new home. They had a baby on the way, so they had much bigger things to focus on. After moving in, they began work on one of the second-story bedrooms and slowly converted it into a nursery. This was when they noticed that the strange events started happening more frequently, and the nursery became the focal point of paranormal energy. Sometimes electronics would turn off or malfunction whenever they're close to the nursery, or the landline would drop calls. The family dog would even show his teeth and seem to growl at nothing in the nursery. But the more he growled at nothing, the more Tony and Debbie suspected he could see something that they couldn't. He was usually mellow and easygoing, so it was strange they were seeing him be aggressive for no reason at all. After about a week, the dog stopped growling, and they figured that he was just finally getting used to his new environment. Shortly after, Tony and Debbie began hearing noises coming from the nursery. Creaking, tapping, and scratching noises. It wasn't just the usual sounds of an old house. It sounded like something was actually in the nursery. The sound of furniture moving across the floor made Tony and Debbie rush to the nursery to see what it was, but when they looked in, everything was just how they left it. In the mornings, neighbors would come by and ask why they left the lights in the nursery on all night. Tony and Debbie would look at each other, very confused, but they didn't know what to say because they never left the nursery lights on at night. When they would go to the room to check, the lights would be off just like they had left it. But the neighbors insisted that the lights were on for more than one night. One evening, Tony and Debbie were getting back from his family dinner, and Debbie's sister Karen had come back with them to visit for a while. At one point that evening, Karen had gone upstairs to check out the nursery when she noticed the dolls in the room had fallen from the shelves and formed a mysterious circle in the middle of the room. It looked as if the dolls and stuffed animals were performing a seance. When Karen asked Debbie and Tony why they put the dolls on the ground, they told her it wasn't them. It was something or someone else. After they set the dolls back in their proper place, they turned the nursery lights off and went back downstairs. But when Debbie went up to the nursery later that same night, she found a teddy bear lying in the center of the room, and the lights were on. The next day, one of Tony's brothers came over to take a picture of the bear, and they all went up to the nursery, where the bear was still on its back. As he pointed the camera and looked through the viewfinder, the bear quickly spun around on the carpet, and everyone went into an immediate panic. After the incident with that bear, they didn't know what to do or who to contact. They figured the best thing to do would be to document what happened in the house from here on out. Many skeptics suggested that Tony's brother played a prank on them, but the strange events continued night after night. Sometimes they could hear a disembodied voice of a young girl. Her voice was soft and sweet, but something about it was a bit off. As the strange events continued, the young couple became more worried, and after Debbie gave birth to their son Taylor, the presence seemed to hate the fact that there were now 2 males in the house. It was only a matter of time before the ghost released its true potential. On the night of Halloween, during the first year that they lived in their house, in 1992, Tony returned home from work late one night. It had been a long day, so he headed into the kitchen where he fixed himself a drink. As he picked up his drink and turned around, he noticed a young girl staring at him in the corner of the kitchen. She didn't say a word. She just looked at him with a blank stare. The drink slipped out of his hand and shattered on the kitchen floor. As soon as the glass broke, the apparition of the little girl vanished into thin air. Tony could hardly believe what he had just seen, but he knew his eyes weren't playing tricks on him. He immediately ran up the stairs, screaming to Debbie, "I saw her! I saw her!" They had suspected that the ghost was a little girl, but this was the first time that the Pickmans had actually seen her. Ever since Tony saw her, they had a mix of fear and excitement. They weren't sure how to feel, but soon enough, fear would be the only emotion in the Pickmans' household. After the birth of their son Taylor, the strange activity focused around the nursery. The endless torment kept the baby up all night. Even after putting him down for the night and turning off the lights, they would notice the lights would always come back on. Debbie had a feeling that someone was in the nursery at night, playing with her son. When she went in to check on him, he would be alone in his crib, but the lights would be on. When they would try to go to sleep, Taylor would scream and cry throughout the night. At first, they thought this was just regular behavior from a newborn baby. But as time went on, they suspected it was something else. Strange events would occur in the nursery for no reason at all. Electronic toys would turn on and off at random moments. And one time, Debbie was vacuuming the nursery carpet when the wind-up musical toy above Taylor's crib began spinning around on its own. Everything that happened was seemingly harmless. But once they found evidence of mold growing on random household objects in that one specific room, they knew they had to do something. So they moved the nursery to another room because they didn't want to risk something terrible happening to Taylor. But even after switching rooms, the strange events continued happening. Not only did the activity become more frequent, but it became more violent. The days of simple lights flickering or objects moving were behind them, and the paranormal events became so intense that Tony and Debbie were convinced that there was a demon in the home. They didn't know if the young girl was a demon herself or if she had allowed a demon inside their home. Some suggest that the little girl spirit was also a victim, and the demonic presence terrorized her the same way they terrorized Tony and Debbie. As the activities escalated, Tony and Debbie decided to spend the night at a family member's house. They packed their bags, but as soon as they headed out the door, Tony started feeling a small burning sensation along his back. After only a few steps outside the door, that slight burning pain became a nightmare. It felt like hot, burning flames were creeping across his back. He had no idea what was happening or how to stop it, and luckily, it didn't last long. But the aftermath was gruesome. After the attack ended, he lifted up his shirt and noticed 3 massive scratch marks across his skin. Blood bubbled from each wound. This was the first time that this demonic presence had ever made a physical attack against the family, and it wouldn't be the last. Tony would continue to feel the burning sensation across his skin at random moments, and he would notice scratch marks appearing across his stomach, arms, chest, and back. He could even stare at his skin when he began to get that burning feeling and watch the scratches slowly appear out of nowhere. Those scratches made his skin swell, and small beads of blood would begin to appear. They never knew what provoked the attack, but the things are obviously getting worse for the Pickmans. So they decide to contact a psychic medium by the name of Barbara Connors. They were clearly desperate to figure out what was happening in their home, now that the paranormal activity had turned violent. They feared for the family's safety, When they talked to Barbara on the phone, she said she needed to visit the home for her.